Yes, Jerry L. Green, the Black Student Advocate, here with Dr. McHenry. Dr. McHenry, let's talk about your organization, what you guys do, and how you advocate for students.
Okay, we have St. Cary's Center, and St. Cary's Center was established in 2001, and our goal was to help marginalized children and their families. And in 2013, we started St. Cary's Center Smart Academy, and that stands for Science, Math, Art, Reading, and Technology. And our understanding was that marginalized children, low-income children, many African-American children, they were going to need 21st century skills to be able to be successful. And so we were going to communities, low-income communities, large African-American population, and working with the children in environmental science. And we did a lot of math games, work with them on their reading to bring them up academically. And so far we've been doing, we've really been enjoying ourselves, and we've been making a difference in children's lives.
Okay. Let's talk about your background. You come from a school, psychology background. Let's talk about that.
Okay. I'm a school psychologist by profession, and I was receiving a lot of pressure to identify socioeconomically and culturally and linguistically diverse children as being handicapped, and they were not handicapped. It was a matter of the schools not being culturally sensitive and not wanting to be culturally sensitive. And it was a matter of not being able to make that homeschool connection. And actually, many of those children were quite bright. Many of them were taking on adult responsibilities. Many of them had parents who were working, and their parents were underemployed, which means that both parents would work 40 hours a week, and then there would be a child who was responsible for the other children. And the children would have to fend for themselves after school. And so these kids clearly were not disabled in any way. They did need instruction or academic that they could incorporate into their lives. And so I decided to leave the school system, leave the university level, and I started conducting research for myself to find out why children were having challenges learning. And that work took me to 5 continents, and I worked in over 5 languages.
Okay. So now with what you're doing at St. Cary's, how have you seen that help you, or the pushback from the districts, being that you come in and you know what's on the other side of the fence and what you're up against, what kids are up against, and the parents, and now for what you're doing and how you're assisting?
It's really interesting because, I have always been an advocate for public schools. And I have always admired public school teachers as well as administrators. And now that I'm on the other side, I'm perceived more as a threat. And my issue is, if something isn't working, you don't blame the victim. You do something different. And I'm going to use the example of a dentist. If you go to a dentist and you have a toothache, the dentist doesn't judge you or lecture you about your teeth. The dentist will try to restore your teeth, and he'll try to fix that problem and keep doing things until your pain is gone. And we've got into a situation where we put up the blocks, or we're frustrated, or we don't understand what's going on, or we feel pressured because of the more rigorous curriculum. And so we're just blaming the patient. And that's not going to solve our problem.
Okay. So right now, what is some major headways you made since you've been doing St. Cary's, and some actual good testimonies and, things that you've been able to do in the community?
Okay. So one of the first things.
Tell them where you're located at also.
Okay. Right now I'm located in Hemet, California, and I'm expanding to Palm Desert area as well as the Paris and Moreno Valley area. Okay. So when a child enters St. Cary's Center Smart Academy, the after-school program, the first thing we do is assess them, because that's my background. I want to know how well you read. I want to know how well you do math. And then I want to know that the interventions that we're planning for you, that those interventions are successful. I also want to know what you're interested in, because if I know what your interests are, then I can steer you towards books or math problems that pique your interest. And, I've had young men who are interested in cars. And so, we go to the library. I encourage the parents to fill out the forms for the library. We actually take them to the library on a field trip. And then we have them select books that they're interested in reading. And then we have them sit down with an adult for 20 to 30 minutes every day and read that particular book. And then we also use that book as a teaching tool. I was explaining to one young man, you don't just have to fix cars, you can design cars. You can make cars better. We don't know, the cars of the future may be flying. So you could be one of those people to design those cars. And we show them how math and science and engineering and all those elements work into that particular interest. So what I'm trying to do is educate, engage, and empower. I want children to understand that what you're learning is something that you're going to use, that's something you're going to need, that's something that's relevant to your passion and your interest. And I think once you do that, then children are willing to persevere because they have a personal benefit. There's an intrinsic reward. The reward is in the doing. If I love cars, if I love lowriders or whatever,
Right.
that's a mechanical process. So having somebody who has a car like that to come in and talk to the students and being able to explain the physics and the mechanics and having them do research on those cars, which requires you to increase your vocabulary. It requires you to have social skills and to be able to interact. You're looking at design, you're looking at technology, you're looking at engineering, you're looking at so many other things. And I think that when you give a child that kind of personal attention, then they are more successful and they do grow at a rapid rate.
Something you said, here at the Black Student Advocate, we have our school report card. And we came up with our own grading system, the A through H, which is A for attitude toward the Black student, B for behavior toward the Black student, C for care for the Black student, D, discipline of the Black student, E, evaluation of the Black student, F, false evidence appearing real about the Black student, G, guidance or grades toward the Black student, and then H, holistic approach. And I think that's what you just came in real big at, is the holistic approach, saying what's their interest, and wrap everything around that. And with that, the child's going to see your behavior toward them, how you care, how you discipline, how you evaluate. And that's what it's about, looking at the whole child. So speak a little bit more on that.
Okay. I want to go back, though, to one thing. You mentioned discipline. Okay. Discipline means to teach. Discipline does not mean to punish.
Right.
There is an antecedent, there is a behavior, and there is a consequence. If you do not like the consequence or you do not like the behavior, change the antecedent. And so when we talk about discipline, one of the things I do is an orientation for my students and my parents and inform them of my program. I let the parents know in terms of the technology programs we get on, like Khan Academy or Prodigy or some of the other reading programs. I encourage them to get on programs that I know are child safe, where they won't have pop-ups on the computer and then somebody's asking them some personal information. So I give everybody an orientation to begin with.
Okay.
And I don't just do it one time. I do it when they register their child. I let them know about my program. I let them know what we do. I encourage them. I give them opportunities to come in and work with us. We had one parent who made hats for us to be in the Christmas parade. Okay? So it's not just a one-way kind of dialogue. When the students come, I give them an orientation in terms of our schedule, our bathroom schedule, our snack break, when they can have a snack break, when they can go outside and play. Some of the physical activities that we do are actually math activities. When they're doing the races and we're timing them and we're graphing the racing, or we're graphing the number of free throws with basketball, they enjoy those activities. Those are PE activities, but again, I've made it into a math game as well. So when we talk about discipline, it's not about waiting until a child does something wrong. And this fits in with what you're talking about in terms of holistic. It's about communicating to the children what you expect. So then the classroom becomes self-managed. Children will say to me, okay, I'm to read 20 minutes. Which adult can I read to? And so then, you put them with an adult volunteer, and it's like, I need to do my Prodigy now. It's like, okay, we have a schedule in terms of they sign in on the computer so we know how long the child has been on the computer. We're supposed to do our music lessons today. So they actually come in the door and they know the schedule for the day. They know the routine. And that minimizes problems, and they can remind each other. They can say, it's not time for snack. We're going to have to finish our math before we have snack. So I'm not correcting children all the time. I'm not punishing children all the time. My discipline is that I teach them what my expectations are, and then I reinforce that. If we have a problem, then I stop. We go back and approach that activity again. And I instruct them in terms of what I want to see. And that's what I get, what I teach them. And so that makes the program a lot smoother. So when you look at holistic, every behavior, and this is my school psych background, every behavior communicates something. And many times children don't know how to resolve conflict. They don't know how to handle their frustration. And so we have to create a system where if you're having difficulty, that there's somebody in that room you can connect with, there's somebody in that room you can relate to, and you can share that with that particular person, and that person will act as an intermediary. That person will get you together with that other student, listen to their side, in private, then listen to your side in private, then bring the two of you together. And by the time you do that, the situation has de-escalated because that child feels heard. Right. So we clearly look at the whole picture. We don't get a lot into family business, and I want to say that because a lot of people feel that when you're working with children from low-income backgrounds, you need to get into their parent and their family life. If they share their family life with us, we let them know they've been heard, but we focus on what we can do the 2.5 hours there in our program. And we try to create a safe, nurturing environment where children can learn. And that becomes the focus. We have a chart, and you get a star for every day you read 20 to 30 minutes. It's like, did I get my star today? Whatever's going on at home, whatever's going on anyplace else, once you come in here, we have a program, it's consistent, and children like structure. They like consistency. They like knowing that they can trust the people that are working with them. And, we give them their star, and they get a star for behavior, they get a star for math, they get a star for science, as well as reading. So the system the reward is intrinsic. The reward is doing what you need to do for you, and being encouraged and rewarded for that. If someone helps someone else, we notice that, and we'll say, thank you, Jamal. That was very kind of you to help this particular student. And we also, when we've had, because we work a lot with volunteers, we have students that when they finish their work, they will help the younger students. I mean, we're truly a family. And they'll help the younger children get through with their work so that they can go play.
Okay. So right now, as you're saying, you're going to expand. Is it going to be the same programs you expand to the other 3 cities, or is it going to be a little different variation when you come Paris to Moreno Valley and to Palm Desert?
I think initially what we want to do with those communities, you talk about holistic, you want to address the needs in the community that you're in. There's nothing more dangerous than yesterday's success. And I've had some meetings with Paris, and I've had some meetings with Moreno Valley as well as the Palm Desert area in terms of what their needs are. And so each community, and also, the parents of that community, what would, of the things that we do, what would you like to see in your community? And for Paris, that's the environmental science. They have a really strong, yard to farm program, a yard to table program. And so we're looking at bringing that there. We're also looking at doing reading circles, because reading is so important, and being able to read aloud and reading things that are culturally relevant. Children want to see themselves, they want to see themselves in the literature and they want to see themselves in a positive light. And they want to be able to identify with the characters. And once you start to do that, you open up some things. So we're looking at, if we're going to do some book circles with adolescent girls, is also having another female therapist there, based on, that character's life and those girls being able to relate. Things might come up, and we want to be able to address that and deal with it. So each community will have some of the elements, and eventually they'll have all of the elements, but we're going to actually start with where that community wants us to start. And with Moreno Valley, it's the math. They want us to start with the math because throughout Riverside County, our African-American students have really low math scores. And we're perfectly comfortable with going in there with a math program and starting there, and then sharing with them we can do these other things if you have need of these things, and then doing that.
So if someone wanted to contact you, what's your website or email or phone number you can give them?
Okay. My website is www.stcarriescenter.org. That's STCARRIES Center, CENTER.org. We also have a Facebook page, St. Cary's Center Smart Academy. And then my email address is St. Cary's Center, all one word, @gmail.com. And our phone number is 951-468-8287. So I look forward to hearing from any of your viewers.
So if it's one thing or two things, three things that you want to make sure that someone knows about what you're doing, go ahead and say what that is right now.
Okay, we're doing a program called Harriet's Daughters. And this program is for middle school girls. And what we want to do is prepare them for high school in terms of math. But we want to use real life math activities. We want to use money. Money is very important in our society. No matter what you do, you need money as a method of exchange. And so we're having a conference April 28th, 2018 at Vista Del Lago High School in Moreno Valley. It will be an all-day conference. The conference is free. Free breakfast, free lunch. We got interactive activities you're going to get. If you have a smartphone, you can use your smartphone. If you don't have a smartphone, we're going to give you a tablet. Basically, you're going to get an identity, you're going to get a career, you're going to get a salary, and it's your job to go to the different stations and negotiate to get your needs met. So based on your salary, that will determine what you can afford. So maybe based on your salary or career, you only can afford a studio apartment and you want a 3-bedroom house. And then after we do this activity, we're going to debrief. What do you need to do? What career do you need to pursue if you want to live in this fancy high-rise in LA? I mean, that's going to require some work. And this is where you start to make those plans. This is where you show up every day because you're committed to creating the kind of life that you want to commit. And one of the ways out of poverty is actually financial literacy. There are so many predatory lenders that exploit the poor people or people who don't know. So what I'm trying to do is bring people there to educate not only the girls, but their parents in terms of the process. How do you buy a house? If you've never bought a house before, and maybe you have bought a house and you still didn't understand the process. So we're bringing people to get there with that expertise where you can ask questions. So this is really kind of an unconference because people aren't talking at you. They're talking to you and they're answering your questions. And after we do this conference, we're planning on doing this in a couple of more communities, but we want to follow up with financial literacy informational workshops, free to the public, where you can come and you can learn about insurance. You know, your car insurance, what are you paying for? How is that determined? Are you getting a different rate because of the community that you live in? Is that something you need to organize around in order to ensure that you're paying fair rates? Your fees at the bank, what is that based on? And being able to hear about those services in a non-pressured setting where you get to ask questions. And so you get to engage and be a partner in terms of your own financial success. I think it's crucial in our community that we become educated around the issues of entrepreneurship and financial literacy. Even if you have a job, you can lose a job at any moment. We know that. We know about the recession of 2009. So is there some other skills or other talents that you have that you could use to set up your own business? And then how do you decide how to price? How do you decide how to charge? How do you decide return on investment, return on time? All of those are issues that we want to discuss because we're talking about investing in our future. And we're talking about showing up, being different, and getting out of poverty. And it's going to take people like you and I to educate people and make that happen.
So again, excited about the conference. I plan on being on site. So what else is going on? So that's right away, actually now a couple of weeks out.
Yes.
What by the end of 2018, 2019, what are your plans for the organization?
My plans are to look at my strategic plan and how I'm meeting the needs in the African American community. I was actually, for the last year, I've been doing research on juvenile delinquency prevention. And for me, that was a real eye-opener to see how Black students are being pushed out of school. And that's exactly what it is. It's pushed out of school. They're made so uncomfortable in school that they're pushed out. And we know from looking at the research that there isn't, an understanding in terms of how much vocabulary a child needs to enter kindergarten now. Everything has become more rigorous. And so our children are entering kindergarten with the lower vocabulary. We know that number object correspondence is important and they need to enter kindergarten having that skills. We also know that now that preschool has become a part of public schools, our babies are being suspended more. I mean, that was something we've never heard of. You don't suspend a 3 or 4-year-old. You look at the environment and you see what's going on in the environment and you meet that baby's needs. And so We're going to have to go lower and we're going to have to address the needs of our own children. And we're going to have to make sure that they're prepared to enter these institutions. And we're also going to have to graduate them to go into education so that they can advocate for students. And we need that advocate. We need somebody to question. We need somebody to say, are you aware that, and in one case, example that I used to use, we had a Black child, he was 7 years old, and a boy snatched a ball out of his hand. They were playing, they were, engaged in the game, and it was his turn, and he punched the child. And he knocked out his tooth. Well, 7-year-olds have loose tooth anyway. And they called the police. And the police handcuffed this 7-year-old child who was totally confused. He was a little Black boy. And they walked him off the campus. Now, there was another boy. He was 8. The secretary was trying to tell him something. And he was white. And he slapped her in the face. And so they called his parents and had a parent conference and sent him home.
Totally different.
And so, when you're in that situation, you can say, excuse me, him slapping the secretary, a school official, is actually a crime.
Right.
And 2 boys on the playground playing ball and getting into a scuffle, that isn't a crime.
A natural occurrence. That's a natural occurrence.
But you reacted differently. And I'm not advocating, punching somebody because of a ball. But what I'm saying is, we need people there on that side of the fence saying, look at your behavior, look at what you did. Is it consistent? Are you overreacting? And are there alternatives? That the police never should have been called in that instance. And when you see a lot of what's going on in the news, you know that it's people overreacting and calling the police and police getting involved in issues that should be resolved among neighbors.
I was in Dallas back in, I want to say, January, February timeframe. And they had a big stair race downtown Dallas, Big D. So I was talking to a school police. He was out there working overtime. And we got to talking about the advocacy thing. And he said, Jerry, I have so many administrators that want to call me in and have me police when they should be managing and doing their job as teachers and administrators. But they want me to come in with a heavy hand and be the police when it should be an administration issue. And that's what we see in the school system, that now everything is being criminalized versus teachers and everyone handling it like they used to. So on many levels, let me put it like that, not all, let me say on many levels. So yeah, you're right. There's certain things that are, and that's when I said the discipline, how our kids are being heavy-handed, dealt with being disciplined versus someone else when they say, okay, we'll call your mom on that. Well, no, let's look at the big picture and how everyone's being treated. And we know from the numbers here in California that it goes black boys, suspension, discipline, then black girls, then every other race of boys. So it's already, and we know that's also one of the 8 areas that the state says that needs to be addressed, to be looked at, is how we discipline the black child. So,
well, let me just say that black girls are suspended 6 times more, and they're arrested at school 3 times more than other girls. But I also want to say, at one time, it was the responsibility of the school to de-escalate a situation. So if you had an incident, it was not about what the child did. It was not about what the parent did. It was about what you did to de-escalate that situation. And that's clearly behavioral science. That's clearly behavior modification. How you deal with someone who's upset, how you stand, how you talk to them, the tone of your voice, how you interact, and how you listen to what they have to say. And we've stopped doing that. It was always the least amount of force necessary, and don't lay hands unless your physical presence is being threatened or that of another person. And now that's the first step, is to lay hands. When someone is in fight or flight, all their blood goes to their muscles. There's no blood going to their brain. This is a scientific fact. This is brain-based research. So in that sense, we stay back. We use a calm tone. We listen to what they have to say, and we let them de-escalate themselves. We separate them for whatever is antagonizing them. And then when everybody's calm, we come back and we deal with the situation. Now we've gone from somebody's upset, call the police, drag them out. And we're creating our own problems. The entire school, the school that I worked at in the 90s, everybody got some professional assault response training so that we could work in teams to de-escalate the situation. And we always understood, keep your hands off them, let them talk, and just have them walk with you. And it may take a few times saying, come on, we got to go here, we got to go here. But once you show people that you are not a threat to them, that you're not going to hurt them, that they do not have to be afraid of you, they do comply. There's no blood going to the brain. So you give them a directive, 5 words or less, and tell them what you want them to do. You keep repeating that directive until they follow it.
Okay. Let's talk about cultural competency, or the lack of, that we see today in schools.
It's really fascinating because, I was a professor in education, and everybody has learned the jargon. Everybody has learned the jargon. But the truth of the matter is that if you see no value in that culture, you're not going to respect that culture. And I want to give you an example. They started to do research on preschool teachers, and they've been able to show by their dilation in their pupils, their respiration, their voice tone, that they tend to overreact to Black boys. They tend to perceive 3, 4, 5-year-old Black boys as being problematic or threatened. So you can use all the language that you want to use, but when you have 2 boys doing the exact same thing and you're seeing them through a window, and your physiology changes based on the race of that child, and then your behavior changes because you feel like this child is problematic, you feel like this child is threatening, then that becomes the reality. So when we talk about cultural competency, it has to be more than just using words. And I really think that it's up to people like you and I to say to people, if you have no personal relationship with people who look like this, if you've had no honest conversations, chances are you need to check with somebody and see if what you're doing is okay for this particular situation. And that, I mean, children come, they're not blank slates. You know, they come from a family, they eat certain foods, they do certain things, they respond in a certain way. And I want to say this because I think that this was very important. Black parents complain that when they come to school conferences, that they're just told what to do. They feel like they're being talked to like they're a child. And they feel like they're not considered a partner. You cannot educate a child without the teacher and the parent being partners. And it cannot be a one-sided conversation. It has to be sharing some of that child's interests. What does that child like to do? When nobody is telling that child what to do, what do? If you can take any interest and you can make it academic. If, the big thing now is freestyle. And my grandson is 14, and I was explaining to him that freestyle was prose. And he told me, I've never heard of that. And I said, every great poet can put together, it's a form of poetry. And I said, you need to write some of this down, and you're always teaching each other. You're always listening to the sounds. And if you record those sounds are as structurally perfect as any 17th or 18th century grand poet. But yet these boys don't know that. And that's what we have to teach our kids, that your passion, what you're good at, is what you should be doing, and that should be valued. Think about a copywriter for advertising. What are you doing? You're coming up with words. You're coming up with words to promote an image, and then an image that sells. So that's a skill, a marketable skill, a well-paying job, but yet we take that for granted. So I think a part of our responsibility as adults is to find these children, what are you good at? What's your strength? I know what I'm good at. I'm not a chit-chat type of person. So I don't do a lot of, self-esteem and makeup and hair and all that great stuff, because that's not my lane. I am an educator. So if you want to be educated, come to me and I can help you. And we need to do that with our kids.
That's good. So now, again, we've been talking about doing a collaboration. Do you want to talk about that right now, or you want to leave that off here?
Yeah, we can do that. What I'd like to do, because I think that I don't operate from being a victim. Okay, I operate from being a victor. But I think it's really important that we share our stories, that we really share how we communicate low expectations, how we assume that, and it could be out of the kindness of your heart. I've had people come to my program and say, considering this child's background, are you demanding too much from this child? And my answer is no. That child knows that I believe in him or her. That child knows that no matter how discouraged they've been in the past, that they have an opportunity to be successful in my program, and that I will modify my program in any way I need to modify it to be able to address that child and the child's needs. So this is a unique opportunity where I bring over 30 years of brain-based research to help you. And so, yes, I do push them. And they make jokes, they imitate me, and that's okay. That's okay, but they know. You're going to go back to class, you're going to get an A on your spelling test, you're going to do well on your math, and Dr. McHenry is going to push you. But I think it's important that people hear these stories. I think it's important that people hear the experience that I just shared with you about the two boys, one being 7, one being 8, and how they were treated differently, and how that impacts and affects your life. Because I think that many times teachers and administrators are so in the battle that they forget that these are human beings, and that these human beings will go on from them, and what they will do afterwards. And, I have stories. I acquired five languages in 2.5 years. I taught myself the language using technology like we're doing now. went to the country where the language was spoken and worked with refugee children. And I was able to attain an intermediate level of fluency. I never said anything about that because before I went and did it first because I knew people would look at me, they would look at the color of my skin, and they would make assumptions about what I could and could not do. And I see them when people know that you're from a certain ethnic background, that you're African American, they know your income level, they automatically try to shrink your world. So I need to know from those people who are incarcerated, was there a teacher who made a difference? Was there an incident that made you feel bad? Because people need to know their effect. You have such a powerful role as an educator. And I have to tell you, I hold my breath whenever anybody says, Dr. McHenry, I remember when you said, and I think, Lord, I hope it was a good day. So I want to hear those stories, and I want to hear how people were able to overcome that. I mean, you know, you look at the Dalai Lama, and from the time the Dalai Lama was born, people were saying to him, you're magnificent, you're wonderful, you're going to do great things. So, of course, he was loving. He's done great things. And we need to look at the words we use with our children. We need to look at the attitude that we have with them. Are they wallpaper? A lot of, a young Black woman said to me, in terms of support, what she needs is professional women that she can come to and ask questions and won't be penalized in her career. Because people make assumptions, and so she asks a question because she doesn't know, she didn't grow up in that kind of environment, and automatically in the professional world, it's assumed that she's not capable. And we have to do something about that. So I want to hear people's stories, and I want to put this in some kind of anthology, because I think educators need to know from the other side, what is it that you're saying? What is it that you're doing? Or what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're doing that's positive? And what is it that you're doing that's pushing kids out? I will tell you, we know that if an African American child has one Black male teacher in his career, he is more likely to graduate from high school. Guess what? So we know that. So what is it that that Black male teacher is doing? And we also know that when African Americans go into education, they're considered like the disciplinarian. They're there to police Black bodies. They're not there to be educational leaders. And so many, when I surveyed Black teachers and said, why did you leave the profession? And they said, I wasn't an instructional leader. I wasn't allowed to teach. I had to discipline everybody else's student. My room was a timeout room. And so I couldn't be the professional that I wanted to be. I didn't have that kind of support. So we see that at every level. And so I think it's important that we start telling those stories, that we start sharing those stories, that we let people know we're not hallucinating. We're not making things up. When I work at a school for 4 years and I'm talking to this woman and we're walking, from one building to the next, and she asked me, whose aide am I? Whose assistant am I? And I stare at her and I say, I'm Dr. McHenry, I'm the psychologist. And this woman has seen me for 2 or 3 years, and she stares at me and she said, are you serious? And I said, absolutely. And she said, I heard them say Dr. McHenry, but I didn't know they were referring to you. So how is it that you can see me for 2 or 3 years, you can hear people call my name, but you don't make the association that that's me? Because I don't look the way you expected me to look. How does that play out when you're 7 or you're 8 or you're 13 or you're 16? How does that work? It's demeaning. And of course, and I have other stories. I taught research and evaluation. And this young woman went to the office and told the secretary that the professor wasn't there. And the young woman I had introduced myself. I got the key. I was there. I was at the front of the room, put my name on the board, had my, put everything on the desk. And the secretary insisted that I was in the classroom. And the young woman came back and she said, I didn't know you were the professor. And I said, that's why I wrote my name on the board. That's why I, arranged everything on the desk. And she said, I thought you were an assistant. She said, I was expecting a white male. The course is research and evaluation. And I started laughing and I just said, well, I haven't been that in a long time. And, I made a joke about it.
Right, right.
But,
right.
these kinds of experiences, they can cause depression. They can cause some bad feelings, some low self-esteem. And I think they have to be shared, and they have to be shared by people at all levels. They have to be shared by people who, like me and you, who have kind of broken through all of that. They have to know that we still experience that on some level. And the role that plays, we have this relationship. We need a relationship between teachers and parents. They need to work together just like mothers and fathers. But if every time I come for a conference, you're going to talk to me like I'm a child and chastise me and tell me what to do, that relationship isn't going to be a positive one. And it's not just, parents. I've had to say to teachers when I've acted as an advocate for someone, that suggestion was not developmentally appropriate. And then we've had a discussion about that. And it's like, oh my goodness, you don't give the parent of a high school student the same kind of suggestion that you give a 6-year-old. A 14-year-old, a 15-year-old has more capabilities. They're expected to take more responsibility for themselves. They're expected to interact in a community. They're preparing for adulthood. And they need responsibilities that are commensurate with that level. So we got some work to do, but telling the story and having a face to the story. Storytelling is so important. And I think once we start telling those stories, our children will benefit because they'll know that they're not alone. And hopefully we'll see some changes.
I think prime example what you're saying is that if a parent has already had a bad experience when they were a student, and then they come back in that environment for their child to be an advocate, and then they already have the anxiety of going up to the school, and then they still being talked to like that, that could be very detrimental. Very detrimental.
But I want to say something because this is really important. Yes, there are a lot of parents with post-traumatic stress disorder. But when you are the teacher, when you are the instructional leader, it's your responsibility to address that. And what I'm saying to you is that when a child starts in my classroom, I call every parent and I tell them something positive about that child. I introduce myself and I tell them a funny story about their child. When parents come to my after-school program and I've had to shut people down, we handle our own problems. Unless somebody got hurt or it was a situation that may escalate into somebody getting hurt, when we resolve a problem, we let it go. When that parent comes, I tell that parent what your child achieved today. This is what your child worked on in math. This is what your child worked on in reading. This is the book that we shared. I show them all the things that their child has done. I have children's work all over my walls. And the children, when the parent walk in, they're showing them what they did. They're showing them the papers they did. And they're letting them know, I did that. Because it's our responsibility to create a positive experience. So then when I have a problem with a child, which is rare, no child ever wants me to call their parent and say something negative because I've done so many positives. They want to keep that. They want to keep that. When their parents come, they're happy to see them. They're happy to see me because they know that I'm going to tell them something good about their child. And when we have programs, it's to show their work. It's to highlight if they've written poems, if they have songs to sing, whatever talent they have. And we cheer them on, no matter, what level they're at. If you can get up in the front of that class and do your thing, we're all going to clap for you. We're all going to encourage you. And I think that's important because many times teachers will say, well, the parent came with an attitude. Build the relationship before the child ever enters your classroom. Send the parent emails. I even send the kids, I send their children emails. I'll say, I'm working with Jane on A, B, and C. Is there something she's not successful in her classroom that you would like us to take a look at? And sometimes I will. And then sometimes I'll say to them, that strategy isn't effective for this child. This child has too much anxiety for that. So you're going to have to do this orally.
Again, you're giving many different sides going on. And it's funny, like I said, because I go in and advocate for kids and see what's going on and be like, wow, y'all really don't have a clue as to really meeting this kid's needs. Or just, again, where they're excelling at, build around there, continue to build the kid up versus, beating them down and everything like that. So what else do you want to make sure you get out on the video before we wrap up?
I really want to say that if you establish a relationship with that child, you establish a relationship with that parent, you will solve a magnitude of problems.
And that does it. Again, thanks again, Dr. McHenry. Again, give your phone number, website, and everything before we close out.
www.stcareycenter.org. St. Carey Center at Gmail. We also have St. Carey Center Smart Academy on Facebook as our page. And my phone number is 951-468-8287.
Again, it's Jerry L. Green with the Black Student Advocate.